I spent years downplaying everything I did so nobody would feel uncomfortable. Then I stopped. Someone called it showing off. I didn't apologize. Posted to r/true off my chest. I got very good at the pivot. The pivot is the move where someone asks how things are going and you say pretty good, just keeping busy, and then immediately redirect. How about you? How's everything with the kids? Before they can ask a follow-up question that might require you to say something true. I had been doing the pivot for so long that it had become automatic, a social reflex as natural as shaking hands. Ask me how I'm doing and watch how fast the question becomes about you. I want to tell you where I learned the pivot and what it cost me, and the dinner in October where I finally put it down. My name is Serena. I am 34. I grew up in a family where achievement had a complicated social temperature. My mother, Gloria, worked in administration at a school district for 25 years. My father, Wendell, managed a warehouse. They are solid, dignified people who built a stable life through consistent, unspectacular work and who are proud of that life in the genuine, unperformative way of people who earned everything they have. My brother Marcus is 31 and works in logistics. My cousin Tiffany, who was raised partly in our house after her mother's illness and is functionally a sibling, is 33 and is a dental hygienist. These are good lives. I do not say that condescendingly. I mean it directly. They are good lives. My life went a different direction. I am a software architect. I have been in the field for 11 years. I make, by any reasonable comparison to the household I grew up in, a significant amount of money. I have an apartment I own. I have traveled. I have accomplished things that would, if I said them plainly at a family dinner, produce a specific kind of silence that I learned to dread and to prevent. The silence is not malice. I want to be clear about that. My family loves me. They are proud of me in the way they know how to be proud, which is quietly and with a slight deflection, the same way they are proud of anything that puts someone outside the familiar range. The silence is discomfort. It is the sound of people who love you not quite knowing where to put what you've just said. I learned to prevent the silence by never producing the material that caused it. I learned the pivot. I learned pretty good, just keeping busy. I learned to describe my work in the vaguest possible terms. Tech stuff, I work on systems, and to change the subject before anyone could ask what the systems did, or what I was paid to build them. I learned to let my accomplishments exist privately for myself and for my small circle of friends who existed outside the family's social atmosphere, and to bring only the most compressed and diluted version of myself to the table at Thanksgiving and Christmas, and the Sunday dinners my mother organized with the regularity of someone who understands that families need maintenance. I told myself this was consideration. I was protecting the harmony of the room. I was not showing off, not making anyone feel small, not weaponizing my achievements against people who loved me but walked different paths. I was being humble. I was being a good family member. It took me until 33 to understand what I was actually doing. My therapist's name is Dr. Yawanda Asante. I started seeing her 18 months ago for reasons unrelated to my family, and what she has a gift for is locating the thing underneath the thing you came in to talk about and waiting patiently for you to see it yourself. About 6 months in, she asked me to describe a recent family gathering. I described a Sunday dinner. She asked what I had talked about. I said the usual, my parents' news, Marcus's job, Tiffany's kids, what was happening in the neighborhood. She asked what I had shared about my own life. I tried to remember. I said, not much, I think. I asked a lot of questions. She said, what was happening in your life at that point that you could have shared? I thought about it. I had just been promoted. I had been asked to speak at a conference the following month. I had been working on a project I was genuinely proud of that had gone live that week and was being well received. I said, some things. She said, why didn't you share them? I said, I didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable. She said, tell me more about what uncomfortable means in that context. I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, when I share things that are going well, there's I don't know how to describe it. A shift. Like the temperature in the room changes and everyone adjusts. My mom gets a certain kind of quiet. Marcus makes a joke. Tiffany changes the subject. And I've learned to skip that sequence by not producing it. She said, So you've been editing yourself to manage other people's discomfort? I said, yes. She said, what's it cost you? I had not been asked that question before. I sat with it for a long time in that session, and longer after it. What it had cost me, the specific loneliness of being celebrated by strangers, colleagues, conference attendees, people who knew my work, while my family knew almost nothing about the work or the life built around it. The loneliness of sitting at a Sunday dinner feeling like a guest at a table I had grown up at. The slow, erosive effect of performing a smaller version of myself in the spaces where being yourself was supposed to be safest. The years of pretty good, just keeping busy while something real was happening that nobody in that room knew about. She said, what would happen if you just said the thing? Plainly, without the pivot. I said, the silence. She said, and after the silence? I said, I don't know. I've never let it get there. I stopped using the pivot in April. Not overnight, gradually, across several Sunday dinners, introducing more. Answering how are things with actual things rather than redirections. Describing my work in specific terms when my father asked what I was working on. Saying the full title of the conference I was speaking at when my mother asked why I was traveling. The silence happened. Every time, in some form. And then, as Dr. Asani had asked, something after the silence. My father asked a follow-up question about the conference. He wanted to know what I was going to say. I told him. He listened to the whole thing and said, that's interesting. How do they pick who speaks? I said, they ask people who've done specific work in the field. He nodded. He said, good. He went back to his food. It was a small exchange. It was more than I had gotten in years because I had not been giving anyone the material to ask questions about. My mother started telling her friends things I discovered gradually. I would hear about it secondhand from cousins who said their mothers had mentioned Serena's work. She was telling people. In her own way, in the quiet sidelong way she has of being proud, she was telling people. She just needed to know what she was telling people about. I had been depriving her of that for years because I was afraid of the silence. The dinner in October was a larger gathering. My Aunt Sandra and her family, a cousin visiting from out of town, the usual Sunday architecture expanded to accommodate more people and more noise and more overlapping conversations. I was sitting across from Tiffany and her husband Darnell when my Aunt Sandra asked, loud enough for the table to hear, how work was going. I said, really well, actually. I just got asked to lead the architecture on a new platform we're building. It's a bigger scope than anything I've done before, and I'm excited about it. The table received this. A few people said that was great. My uncle asked what an architecture was in this context. I explained briefly. He said, ah. The conversation moved. And then Tiffany said, not loudly, but not quietly, in the tone of someone sharing an observation with her husband that she has slightly misjudged the volume on. She always has to let everyone know. The table didn't hear it. Darnell did.
I did.
I looked at Tiffany. She looked back at me. I could see her register that I had heard. I could see her decide, very quickly, between two versions of what happened next. The version where she walked it back, and the version where she held it. She held it. She said, more directly now. I'm just saying. Every time someone asks, it's always the biggest thing, the most exciting project. I said, you think I'm showing off? She said, I'm just saying it's a lot. I said, can I ask you something? She looked uncertain, but said yes. I said, for the last several years when people asked how I was doing, what did I say? She thought for a moment. She said, I don't know. Fine? Busy. I said, yes. Always fine and busy. Never anything specific. Do you know why? She said, because you're private. I said, because I was trying to make sure nobody felt uncomfortable. I spent years not saying what was actually happening in my life so that the table temperature didn't change. And I've spent the last few months trying to stop doing that because it was costing me something. So when you hear me answer a question about my work with an actual answer about my work, what you're hearing is me trying to stop shrinking myself. That's not showing off. That's just answering the question. Tiffany was quiet. Darnell was looking at his plate. I said, I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I'm saying it because I think you deserve to know what you're actually responding to. I went back to my food. The table had caught enough of the exchange to be quiet in the specific, adjusted way of people who have registered that something happened. My mother looked at me from across the table with an expression I could not fully read. Not disapproval. Not entirely. Something more complex. Tiffany didn't say anything else about it at the dinner. Here is what I did not do, which is the part one want to stay with. I did not apologize. Not at the table, not after dinner, not in the week following when I had enough time and distance to second-guess myself and produce the apology from a place of discomfort. I did not text Tiffany and say I'm sorry if that came across wrong, or I didn't mean to make you feel. I did not do the thing I had been trained to do, which was to sense that my existence had produced discomfort in someone and immediately work to dissolve the discomfort at the cost of myself. Tiffany texted me 4 days later. She said, I've been thinking about what you said at dinner. I think I was being unfair. I think I'm used to you being a certain way, and you weren't that way, and I made it into something it wasn't. I read that text twice. I wrote back, I appreciate you saying that. I've been the certain way for a long time, and I'm trying to be different. It might feel off for a while. She wrote, I can get used to it. I wrote, good. My mother called me the week after the dinner. She said she had noticed what happened with Tiffany and asked how I was feeling about it. I told her the true version, the whole story, the pivot, the years of pretty good just keeping busy, the cost of it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I didn't know you were doing all of that. For us. I said, I know. She said, you didn't have to do that. I said, I know that now. She said, I want to hear about the platform you're building. So I told her. The full version, as clearly as I could translate it into terms that didn't require a technical background. She asked questions. Not deeply technical questions. The questions of a mother who is trying to understand her daughter's work because she realizes, somewhere in the conversation, that she has been receiving a compressed and diluted version of it for years and wants the real one. We talked for an hour. When we got off the phone, I sat quietly for a moment. Not sad, not relieved, something that is both. The specific feeling of something long carried being set down. The weight only noticeable now that it was no longer in my hands. I had been carrying it since I was, maybe, 23. 11 years of pretty good just keeping busy. 11 years of the pivot. I had set it down at a Sunday dinner in October, when someone called it showing off, and I did not apologize. That was the whole of it. That was enough.